Before we get started, though, I believe we have to get us all on the same page, we've got a very short video to throw on the screen here.
You see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
So, what would you call what we just saw an example of?
Well, the right terminology is an AI synthesized fake. It has been called in the media a deep fake, which is sort of a catch-all for many different versions of using automatic algorithms, automatic computer systems to synthesize fake video and fake audio. So really, in some ways, it's the classic automation story, which is we have taken out of the hands of the dedicated, skilled digital arts expert, and we've turned that over to an AI system to synthesize that. So in case it wasn't clear, what you were seeing was Jordan Peele is speaking. He does a very good President Obama impersonation. The video was an original Obama video, and then the mouth was re-synthesized by a system to be consistent with a new audio track. And I don't think it takes a stretch of the imagination to see the power of this type of fake, because you can literally put words into now anybody's mouth with this type of technology.
So what should we call it? I mean, people call it deep fakes, but I feel like...
Unfortunately, that name seems to have stuck. You should all know that's actually a tag name for a Reddit user who sort of made his fame in creating non-consensual pornography, so I don't like giving that person the fame. But that name seems to be sticking around, and frankly, it's more catchy than AI synthesized content.
What are we hearing?
What do you think, Alyosha?
Yeah, I think this is not quite what I think we want to kind of have a separate between the AI synthesized content, which is could be a lot of things. A lot of visual effects studios are starting to use AI synthesis technology, and stuff that's essentially where you're creating something that it's fake, but you're pretending it's real, right? So I think that is a key distinction. What is the message you're bringing in with that content? Is that here is some fiction I have synthesized in a video, like Forrest Gump, for example, right? Yeah. It's all fake, right? But it's fiction, yeah. So it's the right thing to do. Versus you're presenting something as real, maybe on a TV broadcast, but actually it's not.
Yeah, it's like an illustration versus a doctored photograph. It's that kind of difference.
I mean, you could still have a doctored photograph as a piece of art,
yes.
But then it should be explained that this is in the museum, this is an art piece. Like it's like the fiction section of a bookstore versus a non-fiction section, right? If you put something that is actually non-true, in fact, there were cases, all through the 20th century, something was published as a non-fiction, and then the publisher found out that, the author basically made it up, yeah. And they basically just moved it to the fiction section.
So, like you said, this has been happening for a long time, both with fiction and nonfiction, right. But specifically with this type of synthetic media or synthesized media, it's been happening for years. Why are we only just talking about it now?
So basically, we have been faking photographs since the beginning of photography. The classic photograph of Abraham Lincoln standing that is in many classrooms all over this country is a fake. It's actually John Calhoun's body, and put on top of that a Lincoln head. And this has been happening throughout time, and we have actually been okay with it when it's in a movie like Forrest Gump. All the special effects houses are doing an amazing job presenting something that is fake as if it is real. I think the main difference is that now it's starting to be much more democratized, that it's not just the dictators and the CIA and the KGB and the special effects houses that could do it. Any kid with a computer is able to make something in Photoshop which is, I think, still the best kind of a fake algorithm that we have right now. And now the deep learning methods are starting to get better and better, by the month, really. So I think it's really, the difference is the democratization.
I think that's absolutely right. I would add two more things to that, which is we absolutely now have the ability to create very compelling fake content, whether that's images, video, or audio. But the real threat in some way is the two other components to this, which is the distribution mechanism. We also have the ability to distribute this to the world instantaneously through social media. So YouTube, Twitter, Facebook have changed the way we communicate online. And I think if you've been reading in the press recently, there's not a lot of quality control on these platforms. So that's number two. And then number three, of course, is the willing public to consume this content. So if you look at the fake news epidemic, I would say, of the last few years, you could blame the people creating the fake content, but at the end of the day, you have to blame us, the people consuming this, sharing it, liking it, and tweeting it. And so now you have, in many ways, the perfect storm. You have, as Alyosha said, the democratization of access to technology to create sophisticated fakes. You have democratization of access to delivering this to the world instantaneously, and you have a bunch of knuckleheads out there who are willing to consume it. And that's the ball game right now, and that is the fake news phenomenon we've been living with over the last few years, which is, it's not fundamentally new. We've always had misinformation, but it is on extra strong steroids right now. And I think we are seeing the consequences of that. We are seeing election tampering here in the US. We have seen misinformation campaigns in the UK in terms of Brexit. We've seen horrific violence in Myanmar and Sri Lanka and the Philippines and India. There's hardly an election in the last 2 years where there have not been massive misinformation campaigns on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And that's just scratching the surface of the poison that is online. And I think these new technologies are simply adding fuel to an already pretty big fire.
And certainly, obviously, we've seen a lot of misinformation in terms of just propaganda and various, junk being put out by IRA and stuff like that. But do you think that the 2020 presidential election will be the first one where we see widespread fake imagery, like a video of faked audio? Like, will this be the kind of breaking point where it's like, this is suddenly has become a problem?
I don't like to make predictions because I'm almost always wrong.
That's fine, go ahead.
But I will tell you that it does feel like it's inevitable. So if you look at the fake news phenomenon of the last 2 years, and now you simply add to that the ability for the average person to create fake content, it's not a stretch of the imagination that that's going to come. But I think in some ways there's a more perverse problem that we have, which is that once we live in a world where we can create fake content, everybody has plausible deniability.
Yeah.
So think back, for example, 2.5 years ago, then candidate Trump is heard on an audio recording from the Access Hollywood tape saying some pretty awful things. Nobody said it was fake at the time. They apologized. Now, 1.5 years later, he did actually say it was fake. I don't know why he apologized in the first place, but whatever, I don't care. But today, does anybody in the audience think that if that audio recording came out, President Trump wouldn't have said it's fake news? Of course he would have. And he would have had actual plausible deniability. So in some ways, that, to me, is the larger threat, is that in a highly partisan space, if everybody can simply say the video, the image, the audio, the news story is fake because it doesn't conform with my worldview, we have a problem as a democracy. Because if we can't agree on basic facts of what's going on in the world, I think we're in a lot of trouble.
And to be clear, in the video that we saw, that was Jordan Peele doing a very good Obama impression.
Yeah.
But if you listen to it for a little while, you're like, oh, it's Peele. But there is now, we are getting much better at synthesizing a specific voice, especially a politician or a public figure who has been recorded for hours and hours and hours. How is that research coming along? That doomsday machine everybody's working on.
I think it's getting there. It's getting there. It's
Thank you, by the way.
Yeah. No, but look, this is how it is. It's a nature of technology to get better, and I think, if you think about something like generative adversarial network, like if you actually believe in the story, you're optimizing for an image that it will be indistinguishable from a real image. So if that optimization, if we can finally manage to get this optimization to work, it's not quite working yet, but in the limit, it should be indistinguishable from real image. So yeah, I think in the long run, I think we are screwed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
I mean, both of us are working on methods to find, to detect these fakes, but it's kind of like, it's like antivirus software. Like we are gonna, we are, you are fighting, but you're never going to win, right? The virus writers are always going to find something. But I think fundamentally, I think if we step back and think about it in a long term, there was this weird time, about 100 years, from the birth of photography to the birth of Photoshop, when we believed that photography was the truth. And I think that even without any manipulation, that was a wrong belief, because the framing, what the photographer decides to keep out of the frame, what kind of the bias that the photographer brings in, all of those things make it not a objective observer. It is very much a subject. It has always been a subjective observer. This is why photography is an art form. You have great artists doing photography because they bring in their subjective self. And so, in a way, there were mechanisms before photography about, like if you go to the British Library, you will see the Magna Carta, signed by all of the nobility in England, and they were all there. They all came in person to witness the signing of the Magna Carta because they wanted to be sure, because they didn't want to believe in some hearsay.
They couldn't just live stream it.
That's right. They couldn't
FaceTime.
But one could argue that even if there was live stream, you should actually just come in person.
It's important.
Because just like letters could have been faked in the 19th century, and people didn't quite believe letters and signatures. The same thing is actually true with photography, right? All those fakes that Joseph Stalin did by removing his comrades from his photographs. This has been happening for a long time, and so maybe we should get used to not trusting visual evidence as if it was evidence, as if it's admissible in court, because it shouldn't be. It probably never should have been, and now the public is finally waking up to this.
So what do we trust?
The standard protocols that were around for many years, people coming together in the same place, until we get holography to work, and that's way longer horizon. I think that should still be, the modus operandi. And frankly, I think the reason that all these businessmen fly around for meetings instead of just Skyping in addresses this, that somehow internally we are still much more preferred to be face to face, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons.
So you do research into both creating and detecting this type of imagery and various forms of media. Why do you think it's important to pursue it on your own terms here? Is there an element of, if I don't do it, someone else will?
Well, in terms of synthesizing visual content, now this is an old field. It's called computer graphics.
Yeah.
And without computer graphics, there wouldn't be, none of the blockbuster movies would be there without computer graphics. Avatars and Forrest Gump and whatever. A lot of it is technology that has been extremely useful, and it's fundamentally it's a creative process. Yeah. Why did they invent fortepiano? Harpsichord was good enough, right? Why go to fortepiano, right? Because it's more expressive. So I think in the right hands,
George Lucas,
or in the right hands, it's a brush for a painter in the gallery of brushes. It's a brush for a painter to use to express themselves. So this is fundamentally an artistic endeavor, and computer graphics provides the technology, the new brushes, the new canvases, the new paints for that endeavor. But of course, there has to be restrictions on what you do with it, just like there are already restrictions, and you shouldn't be plagiarizing, right? You shouldn't be publishing somebody else's work. But if but you shouldn't really expect the typewriter to not allow you to plagiarize, right? Say, sorry, this is copyrighted. I'm not letting you type it in, right? This has to be enforced primarily through laws, I think, rather than technologically. Although there are some things we can do technologically as well, but I think they're fundamentally limited. I think without stepping on people's liberty, I think there is a limited set of things that we can do, and we should be doing those things. But I think more importantly, I think we need to make sure that the lawmakers start thinking about how do we update the current laws, like the copyright laws, for example, to address this. But of course, Hany is the expert in all of these things.
I think this is the right sentiment. I'm amazed to hear you say that we should pass laws, because knowing you as I do, I know your skepticism of government. I think you're right, though. I think at the end of the day, there are issues out there that we should be concerned about. So, for example, the non-consensual pornography, where people are taking the likeness of movie stars and putting them into hardcore video. And by the way, let me mention that type of content has been banned by Reddit and by Pornhub. And the question you got to ask yourself is, how bad is something when you're banned by both of those platforms?
Seriously.
So we should think very carefully, and this is a struggle, right? This is a real struggle with the First Amendment, free expression, particularly here in the U.S. Also, with respect to the weaponization of the types of deepfake that you saw earlier, putting words into a presidential candidate's mouth 24 hours before an election, that's, I think most of us would agree, is a problem. On the other hand, I like some of the satire and some of the comedic relief of the current president that we see by way of deep fakes. And so finding that balance, as Alexei was saying, was intent, is a very tricky business. I will say that in other parts of the world, not here on Capitol Hill, in the EU, in the UK, and elsewhere, there is at least draft legislation making the rounds, trying to get a handle on this. I think in many places they're overreaching, and that's worrisome. I think even Putin recently banned fake news in the guise of,
well, it's basically news that's not critical of him. Is
exactly,
fake news.
exactly.
Yes.
And I don't think, frankly, that our president is that far away from that same proclamation too.
Yeah.
So I do think you have to tread very lightly in the legislative side. I think the solution has to be multidimensional. There has to be potentially legislative relief. The platforms, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, and the Twitters have got to get serious about this. They've got to get serious about the content on their platforms and stop hiding behind Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. The game is over. This isn't fun and games anymore. Your platforms have been weaponized, and you have a responsibility. We as the public, of course, have a responsibility. And in many ways, the people in this room, the journalists, the ones who are doing the hard work on the ground every day trying to sort out the real from the fake, have a huge burden on them. And I hate to tell you that, but yeah, this is a burden. And then we as the consumer have to get smarter about how we consume content. It's what Alyosha was saying, is that, look, we've never really been able to trust photographs. There's always been some amount, but now we have to understand that the vast majority, way too much content of what you're seeing online is just not true. And we have got to get smarter about educating ourselves, educating the next generation of consumers of digital content, because the landscape has changed. Alyosha's sentiment is right. Yeah, believe things that you see with your own eyes, but I think we all understand that's not the most practical thing when we're trying to understand world events happening halfway around the globe. So we're going to have to start to rethink about how we are as digital citizens and how we interact with this content online and how we vet information in a thoughtful and trusted way. And I think that's hard. But look, the internet we have today, it's basically 20 years old. I mean, we're like an annoying teenager in terms of the technology. And so I think we're just going to have to evolve. We're going to have to grow up, and we're going to have to take this more seriously and start understanding that the things that happen in the digital world don't stop in the digital world. They have implications out in the physical world. And that means we have to get a lot more serious about all of the issues that we're talking about in order to become more informed and thoughtful citizens.
So I completely agree with Hany. I think these 2 points of the journalists and us, like the journalists really need to get this right. Most of articles I read about fake news is itself fake news, because it's a subtle thing. You can't have, I have journalists calling me up and say, "Oh, can you tell me about fake news?" And I have a 5 p.m. deadline, right? You can't get this piece out by that evening, right? It's something that the journalists really need to understand themselves before they produce their pieces. And for us, the consumers, we need to basically be more vigilant and not trust things, even if they show up in the New York Times. The one time that a fake image could have actually influenced an election was actually a photograph in the New York Times, which was John Kerry and Jane Fonda speaking in a meeting in the 60s, which was fake news. It was a fake image. It was actually a splice of 2 different images, and it was in the New York Times. So even the New York Times, it's not immune to this. You have to be critical, and you have to remember that there is the structure of the business has changed. That things are much more clickbaity now. There is incentive to clickbait. Even, for example, in this meeting, right? You're later going to hear from a person who was accused of intellectual property theft and started a church on worshiping AI, right? Why? Because scandal sells. Because that's what sells the tickets. And so we have seen the enemy, and it is us.
Me specifically.
No, us, all of us.
Yes.
We'll take part of the blame.
Yeah.
Thank you. But one of the things that is useful for everybody, consumers, for you, for me as a journalist, is having the tools to be sure about something. And we can look closer, we can inspect those photographs, but it's getting so good. Like you've said that as we sort of approach infinity here, like it's getting to the point where they're actually indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah.
Like what can we do? Can we make the tools to help ourselves out? Or like you said, are we screwed?
In the short term, yeah. In the short term, we can make the tools. And in fact, finally, I think Facebook and Google are starting to get serious. We are getting contacted by them. They actually asking for our help. There is a big DARPA program called Medi4 where they're actually putting money into this problem. You can see some of it, like I think in Facebook, you can click on this little icon and it tells you, where this news source came from. So there is a little bit happening, and there could be more, and there should be more. I think in the long run, though, I think it's going to be like virus writers and antivirus programs. It's always going to be an adversarial relationship, and I think, the fake news will always be a slight bit ahead. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight back,
Right.
but they will always create new things.
Yeah.
I would add 2 things to that. One is there is tension in the space of developing forensic techniques to authenticate, because when you make them available to the public, you essentially arm your adversary.
Yeah.
So if I build a spam filter or an antivirus filter and I give it to my adversary, well, they build a better virus or better spam. So there's always some tension, and that's particularly difficult in the academic world where we want to publish and make things open. So we have to figure out how to navigate that. And the other is, Alex is right, this is going to be an arms race. And we will lose, the forensics will lose, but that's not all bad news, because what we will do is we will take out of the hands of the amateur, we will take out of the hands of the average person on Reddit the ability to create this, and we will move it into an increasingly smaller and smaller group of people, which is still a threat, but I think it will become a more manageable threat that we can deal with.
Good. Well, that's the first optimistic thing we've heard in this panel. And on that note, I think we can close it. Thank you very much for joining
Thanks,
us
everybody.
today.
Thank you.